City Council meeting to order. It is Wednesday, August 8th at 5:30 p.m. All are present except for the mayor and Councilman Kurth, and we're expecting Mr. Pickner yet. Pretty standard agenda tonight. There are two areas where the public can speak, one during open business from the community, Agenda Item 1C, and Agenda 6, the public hearing. We'll start with Agenda Item 1A, approval of the July 25th, 2018 council meeting minutes. Those are in your packets.
So moved.
We have a motion by John. Do we have a second? Second by Jen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Agenda Item 1B is approval of the August 8 claims for payments. We'll start to my left with Rob.
No questions.
Jen?
No questions.
John?
None, thanks.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Agenda Item 1C is open business from the community. Seeing none, we will move on to Agenda Item 2B, council comments.
None.
Hearing none, we'll start with 2C, and I'm sure Pam has something to say.
I really don't.
Really?
Thank you, though.
Yeah. Tom?
Just a couple things. I want to thank the fire department, the spotters, ambulance crew, and anybody else that helped with the storm cleanup last weekend. It was a huge help. They went out and marked the trees in the different areas for the street crew, and we had, we noticed that it made a big difference again with our underground electric, that we had very few outages with the storm, so that was nice too. Citywide cleanup dates are September 28th, 29th, and 30th. That's all I have.
Okay. Mike?
I've just got a couple things. Sitting next to you, you'll find a sheet that looks something like that. That is an invitation to the Northwest Iowa Developers Partner Meeting, September 19. Lieutenant Governor Gregg will be the speaker, and they'll have an awards. So if anybody's interested in going to that, let me know, and I can get you signed up. Secondly, you'll find a packet that's got a sheet that looks like this with some more papers attached. That's for the Iowa League of Cities annual conference. It's one of the bigger conferences in the state for cities. Attached to that is several sheets with the different subjects they'll be going over. We have a council meeting on September 12th. I would like to go to that meeting. There's a lot of very interesting subjects that are pertinent to us. If any of the council would like to go, let me know, and we will see what we can do with that September 12th meeting. So it is a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so, I understand work gets in the way. Also today, our sympathies are extended to the Gregg family in the passing of Glenn. Glenn was a former city council person and also volunteer head of the chamber for a number of years. So many who know Glenn will miss him and dropping off sweet corn this time of year in your driveway. So our sympathies go out to them.
Thanks, Mike. Travis?
Just one issue. We had Ron Williams with ENC Insurance come by yesterday, and we did a walkthrough of some of the city-owned buildings, just to see if the safety was up to par, and if there's any added value to the buildings or decreased value to the buildings or their contracts. And we also went through Rock Pond Park and just looked at that also.
Great. Thanks. Corey?
All right, been getting a lot of phone calls as of late for parking violations. People are kind of upset with the way some people have been parking, so we've really stepped up our efforts in that. I encourage anybody that's not familiar with the state of Iowa's parking laws to read Iowa Code Section 321, 361, and 321, 362. That will go over everything that we all learned in driver's ed on how to park. I've had a few people that have received warnings from us. I know in the last 2 or 3 days we've written like 51 warnings in town. So that'll show you that there is quite an issue with that. But people parking against the flow of traffic has been one of our biggest ones, where their driver's side door is right by the curb. A lot of people, I've had one person even tell us that, well, this is Hawarden. Well, I understand that, but most of these people haven't gone to a call where a little kid is in that blind spot and they pull out not seeing them, and then they hit that kid and injure somebody, and, you know, we show up and we have to deal with that kind of stuff. So we've been really trying to have a heightened awareness. Like I said, right now, we're just educating everybody with written warnings. So please pay attention to that. Another big one, too, is trailers without a power unit attached to it. They're just unattended trailers sitting out in the roadway. If they're doing construction, a lot of the guys will typically put a cone out, you know, so people can see that. So we've been also letting people know about that as well. So if you guys hear anything about it, that's what it's all about, is actual safety on our roadways. And with it being summer, there's no better time because the kids are going to the pool, they're going to the parks, they're going to each other's houses. So we've really started to enforce that pretty big. Another thing, we've been dealing with a lot of loose dogs as of late. I know the storm attributed to a lot of that. I think just over the weekend, we had 6 dogs that we had to take to the pound, and the pound was full at one point where we couldn't take them anymore. And then once we started taking some of them back to the house, we found out that limbs would fall down on the kennels, and the animals were escaping that way. And so there's issues there, but I encourage everybody that's watching and listening to make sure your dog's secured in your yard, and that you guys have responsibility over that.
Okay. Jim, welcome. Anything?
No, nothing.
Okay. Moving on to other agenda item number 3 is a presentation by Michael Maloney, DA Davidson, Municipal Finance Advisor, on rate changes for the wastewater plant upgrades. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Again, Michael Maloney from DA Davidson, or at 515 East Locust in Des Moines. So good to be up here this evening with you. We're going to be talking about the wastewater plant upgrades. Have visited with you folks before. We've typically done the financing work for the city. The last couple of times I've been up here for the electric side of the utility work for the city's purposes. This is a little bit different today. Rather than the financing out in the marketplace, Hawarden is among a number of communities around the state, and especially Northwest Iowa, that are basically due from a DNR perspective on making some necessary upgrades to the existing facilities for both water and wastewater infrastructure. So this is just a culmination of some of those wastewater facility plans that you've likely seen to date. And we're just going to be talking about the necessary steps from a financing standpoint, some of the requirements that the state requires to take advantage of their very low-cost funding initiatives. I've got a few slides here today. I also have some of the analysis that we've put together while working with the staff, and that will be required to turn to the state when you are able to execute the loan. The reason we're talking today, while this might be a few months down the road, is that you will need to start the process of any rate adjustments here in the near term through an ordinance process, as the city regularly would do with other utility rates. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. No decisions necessarily at this point, but I'm going to go through these slides for you. They're also up on the screen. Answer any questions that you do have at this time. Rather than drop a business card for all you folks, my information's right there on the front cover too. So if there's anything you need, either work through staff or feel free to reach out if there's anything I can walk you through. Kind of slide 2 to start this off here. Just talking about kind of utility revenue bonds. Something that I wanted to kind of just explain here is basically when a city or municipal utility issues debt, you need to be able to cover your operating costs, obviously. And then what people want to be able to see that are lending you the money is that you're going to have dollars left over after paying your bills to pay the debt with some cushion, so we can keep some strong operating reserves and do those kind of pay-as-you-go, basic equipment and renewal replacement type projects. One way that's reflected is the debt service coverage component. So it's kind of expressed in 2 ways, either a dollar and change for every dollar of debt that needs to be paid in a year, or a percentage basis. So the nice thing about when you're borrowing through either the state or the federal government through like a USDA program is that that coverage is at the bare minimum of what you'd see. So in this case, $1.10 for every dollar of debt payment on a future basis. So basically a 10% cushion after paying your bills to be able to pay the debt. That's kind of the basis for whatever manipulations we're going to talk about here later, from a revenue standpoint, an expenditure standpoint, a capital standpoint, and then ultimately a rate standpoint. One thing I do want to also make clear for the council is that utility revenue debt, like we did for electric, the electric fund or the water fund, does not count against the city's debt limit. You're not paying this with property taxes. It's being paid from the sewer fund, so it does not go against any of those state limitations. Just something I want to make sure is very clear from the start here. Ultimately, your capacity, how much you can borrow, is completely based on those revenue constraints. So how much money are you bringing in? What are your bills? What's the size of your project? And how long are you financing for? And that's what we're going to determine here a little bit today. Going over to slide 3. The starting point, and hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone, is that the city's engineering firm's preliminary estimates for the facility plan are in the neighborhood of about $3.1 million. And we know that's going to be subject to bidding and some other pieces of the puzzle, but we wanted to use that 3.1 as kind of the baseline for now in terms of our starting understanding of the capital needs that the city currently has on the sewer side. The SRF program is administered by the Iowa Finance Authority, who in Iowa works hand in hand with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, DNR. So you've kind of got a two-pronged set of tests that you're going through. So anything from the environmental review, the engineering reports, those are all going to be processed by DNR for eligibility. And as they pass through the DNR steps, then the Iowa Finance Authority will administer the financing to you. And the reason to jump through some of these extra hoops is that the state's providing extremely low-cost financing solutions at this time for communities just like Hawarden. So in your case, their interest rate is 1.75% for 20 years, and an extra 0.25% a year is their basically administration fee for the state giving out these loans. So an all-in rate of 2% on the borrowing. The other nice piece is you only pay interest on the money you've drawn, which is a really nice perk. Rather than borrowing all the money up front like you would on your home mortgage, you can borrow it just as you need it over the maybe 6 to 18-month period of your construction project. So that's a really good benefit in terms of not just the interest rate, but the flexibility you have. The term of the loan up to 20 years is unchanged in terms of interest rate. So you're pretty well off just borrowing for that 20-year term. And if you wanted to prepay it early, you can do that at any time without penalty. There's a lot of flexibility once you've gone through the state program in terms of how you'd work through this going forward. We talked about that debt coverage level. The only requirement for the program is that you'd be at 110% level. That's kind of the bare minimum that we've talked about. We'd like to kind of set things up with rates and charges. One, we want to have some conservative estimates, but not too far off of what we think reality would be. And two, we want to set up to manage slightly higher than the legal minimum. So instead of maybe 110%, we might manage to about 115%, just to be on the safe side, allow for any volatility if we get a really dry year or something along those lines. All right? So I've talked about a little bit about revenue requirements as we kind of back into the rate discussion. And I like to think about the flow of funds coming through the system each month. You're going to end up having your customers are going to pay their water bill, and that comes into the city. First thing that goes towards is going to be paying for those operating expenditures, things like staff costs, chemical treatment, electricity, the type of things that we need to run the day-to-day operations of the plant for the city. After that, the next obligation that we'd have is to make these debt payments. And then after that, we want to have dollars available, like we said, to cover those kind of smaller pay-as-you-go equipment or repairs and replacement type projects. And then also keep some cash balanced back there in reserve. It's important to have some rainy day funds just to take care of those maybe one-off type repairs that you need to make. It's just good operating practice. Kind of a bare minimum that we like to think about is about 3 months or 90 days operating cash on hand. Or we also like to think of it just based on the size of just kind of absolute dollars, right? For a smaller system, 90 days might not be more than $20,000 or $30,000, so there's kind of an absolute level. In your case, we're talking about $150,000 to $200,000 of just kind of money in the bank for a rainy day, just to be very safe and solvent from that standpoint. One thing that we want to do, yes, this is a target. There are a couple ways to slice this, but ultimately, we need to have made the rate adjustments, even if they haven't been enacted in terms of hitting people's bills. This body needs to have approved those increases, whether they go into effect the following month, the following fiscal year, or over a period of time. We just need that to be approved by ordinance ahead of entering into the loan agreement. That's all we need to do. So, like I said, I think it's good to kind of get the ball rolling at this point and review what that impact may or may not be. Based on these cost estimates and some of the other considerations that we've talked about so far, we're looking at rate adjustments in somewhere between $16 a month and $22 a month, depending on some choices that the council could make, and then the average usage, which is really based on your water usage at your home, for how that's going to hit folks' bills. And again, that usage, kind of a rough estimate, depends on community to community. Kind of a nice wide range for a residential user is about 3,000 to 6,000 gallons of water per month. That's kind of what we'd reflect to see on the sewer bills as well. If we flip to the next page, just what does this actually mean and what does that look like for average bills? We've got a couple scenarios put together, and I'm going to be referencing base charge on this. Base charge is the fixed monthly charge that you're going to be paying on your bill, whether you use a drop of water or not. Then you're going to have a variable charge that's going to be only billed to folks that are using above that minimum level of usage, right? There's going to be effort that the city needs to make to just have sewer infrastructure in place for every user, and that's why we have that base charge. Unlike a lot of other communities, the city of Hawarden has done an excellent job historically of setting that base charge in a really responsible way. That should be a heavier weighted portion of the total bill because it provides more certainty regardless of any volatility with seasonal water and things like that. When you're collecting more of the money through those fixed base charges, it means we know we're going to be able to pay our bills, we know we're going to be able to pay our debt, and we're just going to be able to plan a lot more efficiently than other folks that might have, hey, we're going to push it all on your usage, but we're not going to know month to month what those bills and what the revenues to the city will be. So the two scenarios here might not seem too tremendously different, but I think the thing to point out, we're talking about for the lower amount of usage end, you're talking about a difference of maybe $3 a month, 10% in this way. So if you want to think about A to B as maybe a discount from that perspective, that's one way to look at it. Ultimately, we're talking about average bills ranging from the $35 to $43 per month range. So while, on a percentage basis, or hey, $16 a month seems like a lot, I will tell you that most of the places I go to around the state on water and sewer bills right now for folks that have completed their infrastructure, and these would be your rates in place when you've completed the infrastructure, are looking at about double these rates. So, again, you've been in a really strong position overall with the sewer fund. While it's a significant project, I hope there's not as much sticker shock. While it might seem, $16 a month is nothing to sneeze about. Overall, it's not that your rates will be high. They're going to be on the extremely low end. But historically, the city's sewer rates have been on the very, very extremely low end, just for a little bit of analysis there. I do have the detailed breakdowns. I don't really want to get in the nitty-gritty of a spreadsheet. That's kind of the show the work type stuff that I wanted to present for folks. Something that I've applied for all these considerations is that these rates would be basically adopted at some point during this year, maybe something like January 1st, potentially. There are some other options to perhaps enact these rate increases in a phased approach over a couple periods, maybe once for January 1st and once the following start of the fiscal year next July. I'm not saying I've got a magic answer for how to skin that cat. That's sort of part of the discussion that you can have with staff and the rest of your board here. But want to just give an idea of where we ultimately need rates to get to satisfy the requirements we're going to have when the project does commence. Like I said, I'm more than happy to go into the detail. I just don't want anybody's eyes to glaze over here on a Wednesday night, and rather just kind of turn it over to questions. Before I finish, I just wanted to give a shout out quick to staff. It's been really helpful on this. I work with a lot of cities, work with a number of cities in the Northwest, but utility stuff's kind of my thing, whether it's electric or water. So I might ask for a little bit more information than the average person. So I know Tracy's had to put up with me a ton, but all staff's been very helpful in answering our requests. So just want to make sure I got that in. If there's nothing else, lean on staff if there's anything I should highlight at this point, and then council if there's any questions that you may have, process or otherwise.
I think the information's in front of them, and if council wants, say, a couple of weeks to absorb it and continue the discussion, we're fortunate to have two different scenarios we can look at. Bottom line on both scenarios is relatively the same. In your council packet, I included water usage from a two-person family with a yard sprinkler. I put the rate in where it's now, and then at the $27 base and the $30 base. So you can see the difference. And I think the $27 and $30 base and then adjusting the usage came out to a couple bucks over the year, the total. So it's just going to be, both of those are very acceptable. Both of those will get where we need to be. It's just if you prefer to put more on usage and less on base is, I don't think I would recommend going under that $27 base and more on usage due to the fact that, as he said, we need that guaranteed income to pay
To
for
pay
a
it.
pretty significant project for us, so.
Anything else from staff? Council, questions?
We have historically been a little bit low on our rates anyways. If I'm correct, we haven't adjusted those since
We're
2016.
extremely low in the state.
Yeah, we've always discussed that adjustment. Correct.
And I think even with the new rates, we're still gonna be low. So, and I mean, I know it's an adjustment for our residents,
Right.
but we're, statewide, we're still gonna be low.
Yeah. Like I said, it's not a unfamiliar topic, unfortunately.
Anything else? Michael, thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely. And last
Thank
plug
you.
is, I know the city manager mentioned the League of Cities Conference. I highly recommend you go, especially when it's this close. It's in Council Bluffs this year, so take advantage of it being on your side of the state. And if you go, we're speaking this year, so you can see us there.
Great.
All right, thanks, folks.
Agenda item number 4 is Resolution 2018-25 to support the Home-Based Iowa Initiative. Mike, do you have anything on that?
As I explained last week, this is an initiative for recognition for our community and also for veterans. What it was started for is for veterans who are looking for a place to call home or maybe return home. Some communities are offering small incentives if they would want to relocate to their own home and build a home, or if they come back to look at a job. Businesses can also sign up for this. I know Coilcraft is part of it, and that's kind of where they started. They signed up, but they can't get their business listed on it because Hawarden's not a home-based community. So it's a tool maybe we can use to attract people, as well as businesses can use to attract employees.
Okay, do we have a motion for that?
So move.
Moved by John, do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Jen. Roll call vote, please.
Bergsma,
Aye.
Feldhacker,
Aye.
Clucky,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Agenda item 5 is discussion on an amendment to the Hawarden Municipal Code, Chapter 69, parking regulations. Who would like that one?
Once again, this ordinance was in regard to people parking in the front and side of their residence, their street-facing sides, in the front yard or on a non-improved surface. I know Jim has taken the time to throw together an ordinance that's extremely well-written in my opinion. I think it covers everything that we need to in order to get the ball rolling. I've had a couple people call in that were concerned about the winter time, how they can't be parked on the roadway and they have nowhere else to put their vehicle. And we explained to them that's put into this ordinance that they'll be able to park in the street. Yeah, you're in their yard during that time. Typically, when we have that frozen weather or whatnot, the ground is frozen as well, so we're not going to lose that green space like we would in the thawing months. So once they've heard that, we've had a lot of understanding. Had a lot of people actually call and think that it's a great idea as well. And I think most of it was just people that wanted to know why. And once you sat down and explained to them, then they could see that and understand it. So haven't had anybody call in that was completely against it or any negative backlash from it. So other than that, I don't know if Jim wants to speak any of the ordinance itself.
Not unless somebody has questions on it.
Seemed pretty straightforward, just no parking in front and on the sides of your house, the way I understand it.
Right, if in the side of the house
Corner
would
lot.
be if you're a corner lot.
You can park, but it has to be on an improved surface.
On a,
Right.
yes, that's correct.
Yep. You know, and the other thing about it too, it kind of goes hand in hand with the parking against the flow of traffic. I had a couple people tell me it's easier for me to park against the flow of traffic to get out to be into my yard and to walk up that way. And I can appreciate that, but wouldn't it be simpler if you improved your you know, front yard area to have a drive to where you can pull right up to the house, you know, lawfully, and get out and be extremely close to your front door, as opposed to, you know, parking against the flow of traffic and walking up that way. And, you know, they thought about it, and a lot of them agree, and hopefully we can get that going and get people to abide by it.
I had a couple of questions, just trying to play the other side of it.
Yep.
I know that we're probably going to get a lot of questions, you know, well, what if this and what if this, you know? And, you know, just by looking out where I live, I've got a neighbor who their backyard is on a cul-de-sac, and he has a trailer out there. And so, you know, what if, you know, so it's going to be like some of those what if options, you know, and he's on a corner, there's no side of his house, you know, and then there's another thing where he's keeping his trailer on there, but everything's nice underneath it. It doesn't look dilapidated and anything like some of these pictures did.
Right.
You know, so there are, you know, the other side of it where there are people who are maybe keeping up where they're putting stuff, but it's still in a nice,
As with every
Area.
code section, every ordinance, you know, we're given discretion on what we can and can't do with it. Common sense is a major player in that. If it's something that's out of sight, it's out of mind. Most people in a cul-de-sac area, like you're explaining, if there's no direct, you know, if there's nothing that you could see from the roadway, that's what we're trying to
that's
eliminate.
what that is. It's their cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac is in the back of his house. So technically, he's parked in the back of his house.
Oh, so he's
Which is
parked in
on-
the
But
rear,
now
but
when he's in the back of his house,
Sure.
it's seen from the cul-de-sac. He
Sure.
really has no place to put that. But there's also it's not dilapidated. It doesn't have weeds. It doesn't have anything growing around it. He uses it often. So, you know, I think that you know, just to have, you know, to run into some of those kind of issues.
So you're saying it's a through lot, really? Like
Yeah.
what I said in here for through lot, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
And it has got a
so, I
sidewalk.
mean, you're right, I think. I mean, one way to write that, I guess, would be to allow people to choose the street, but I'd really rather hope that they would use their discretion a little bit on that than,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very hard to cover every situation.
Yeah.
If enforcement will exercise their discretion, that's probably the best. And then if they aren't exercising it well enough and you start getting complaints, we rewrite it, you know, or I mean, I thought about, you know, having people be able to go to the council, or even I always think about city administrator, because I like to throw a lot of things on city administrators, you know, but I really wasn't sure you guys wanted people coming in front of you to be the safety valve, you know. I mean, that's obviously a way to handle it too, is people could come to you or through the planning and zoning maybe for some kind of a special allowance for a hardship, but, you know, I don't know if you, I would say let that come back and do it later if you need it.
And I think that's something we could be open to on the particular lot Jen's talking about, you know, granting this person permission to park in his backyard, because technically it's his back, although it faces that cul-de-sac, but, you know, and with the stipulation, he keeps it up and nice, and, you know, I think we're always gonna have a what if this or that, or, and that's where you hope that discretion is played. I don't think any of our ordinances are meant to be hard and fast rules of this is how we run things, and, so, you know, on those some of those special occasions, we're just gonna have to work with people.
Yeah, but if you have an ordinance I mean, when you have an ordinance, you have to enforce it. So there's going to be, you know, well, this person got this, you know,
have to
and this is
enforce
going
it
to
with
be.
discretion.
Right.
Okay.
just like speeding ticket. I can give you a speeding ticket, or I can give you a warning, or I can see you at the grocery store and say, hey, you need to slow down a little. There's ways that we police. You know, law enforcement and policing are two separate things. And we're trying to model our department as police officers, where we have a relationship with each person that we deal with, so we understand where they're coming from, we understand where the city's coming from, and we're that that mediator between the two, and we try to use common sense in our approach to resolve any conflicts that we have. So, you know, if something like that came up, I can see both sides of that. I think that, you know, I don't think that we would issue a citation for something like that unless we started getting some complaints. Then we would have to look at a different way to handle it. And before, you know, the person got ticketed or anything like that, we would talk with the individual, say, hey, is there something else that we can come up with, you know? And we'll talk with the complainant. You know, I'm very, very big on, you know, these people that want to complain about different ordinances. You need to stand behind that. You're the victim coming to me telling me that you have an issue with it. You walk with me and I'll walk with you through everything. If you just want to, you know, tell me that it bothers you, but you don't want to stand by me through a procedure, then, you know, how valid is that complaint? So you get a lot of people that want to point fingers, but not a lot of people that actually want to go through with anything. So, you know, we take that into consideration too. It's very hard to write every single case scenario, because once you do that, there's still going to be something that comes up. So I agree with Jim. I think discretion is the best way to play it. But hopefully that somewhat answers your question.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if there's just a handful of people who are parking incorrectly compared to the people that are parking correctly. Like, how much is this going to affect, you know, the people that are really doing things that a lot of their neighbors don't have complaints or anything, but there's just a handful. You know, is it?
It's
You know,
it's pretty large.
Okay.
The only reason why I even started to look into it is because we'd have people coming up. We have people that walk a lot in this town. First thing in the morning, if anybody's up, 6 a.m., that we have people that are walking. They're walking on our sidewalks where these people are parking in the yards, and when they back up on a day like when we had that storm, the mud is tracked on there. Now these people that are jogging and walking, you know, they're going through that mud, and it's creating an issue for them. So, you know, they have a right to walk on there without, you know, any interference like that. So we started looking into it, and you guys seen some of the pictures. That's just a drop in the bucket of the violations that there would be had this ordinance been in effect.
Say maybe some comments. I think well written. I think I've heard a lot of good feedback on it. I think everybody understands the intention. I think for those that might be in violation, and there's been some reservation that would be a significant cost to them. I think there's been some questions whether the city would finance or provide some grants for improvement. So some things like that to consider, especially for those that might not be ready for that expense. And I know there's been some concerns with, say, second driveways that are gravelled, but they're not definitively edged. You know, would they be expected to all of a sudden enhance their already improved driveways to make sure they're more definitive and meet that code? So there's a little bit of that comes to the discretion.
I mean, the reason I put an edge in is two things. One is if you're going to say not more than 50% of your yard, you got to have a place to measure from.
Yeah.
You know, that was a big part of why I put that in. And the other thing is it fades into your grass. You know, you got gravel that the grass won't grow. You got kind of a mixture. But the main reason was, if we have to come up and measure, so they do, you got to have a place to measure from. So.
Yeah, a lot of it would be, kind of the grass that's growing between the gravel. Do they have to spray for it, or do they have to create an edge? And
wouldn't hurt to spray it.
yeah, it's just those little, am I in violation or am I not? They're kind of just on the border.
A lot of the things too is that, you know, over time you'll start to notice that the crabgrass and everything, like you said, will grow up, and then you have people calling in complaining that they're parking in their yard when really there is an improved surface under there somewhere, you know, and you know, it's just easier just to throw up some landscape edging, which is inexpensive. I mean, to do that, or, you know, find some sort of way. I've seen people even use pavers before, you know, that they've gotten off of Craigslist. I watched a guy do a whole drive that way. And, you know, so yeah, you may have to be creative, but most of these homes, if you look at those pictures, on-street parking is available to them. They're just not utilizing it.
Right, yep. I know there's been a lot of people saying that, like, well, are we ready for the streets to be more congested? Like, well, that's something we have to factor into it, but
Right.
I think everybody's willing to work with it, just some reservation on, am I in violation? What do I have to do? And
Right.
it's a little apprehension, which is expected. but-
Sure.
Anything else with that discussion? And what's the next step for this? Will it be at the next meeting?
If you guys are in agreement to it, we'll put an ordinance on the next agenda for the first reading. If
I'm
you're
in
not
favor
ready
of it.
for that,
I'd like to wait,
Wait, how long?
at least do a little bit more research on, like, I liked what John was saying with some of that stuff. If there is anything, just to have, because it's just like all of a sudden, then we have our residents being able to have to do this.
I don't know if it'll help or not, but I know there are several communities out there that have the same kind of ordinance. If you guys want to look through some of those, if, I think this one is really well-written, but that would allow you a chance to see that there are more out there that people in other communities have adapted. I looked at some of those pictures, and you're right, they're not utilizing the space they have, or they have a whole backyard that they could park in, but they're choosing to park as close to their front door as they can, and there's big ruts, and it is unsightly. But if you want some more examples, we can bring those, so you guys just look through them and see what other communities are doing, and so.
Is there anything more that the police department can do to help you guys in your efforts there?
Yeah, I think it's just more words of caution, not necessarily denouncing what we're trying to do, but just, these what-if situations and understanding there's some willingness to work with them. If they have questions, they can contact you as well.
Yep.
Just a little bit of that, especially, I have it, but is it good enough? Those types of questions.
Okay, we'll discuss that again in the next meeting.
So we'll put it on the next agenda for discussion, and then.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6A is a public hearing on proposed development agreement with ISMA Property LLC. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Mike, do you have anything for that?
No, I have not gotten any comments on this, written or verbal.
Okay. Seeing no comments, we will close the public hearing and move on to agenda item 6B, which is the resolution 2018-26, approving development agreement with ISMA Property LLC, authorizing an annual appropriation tax increment payments and pledging certain tax increment revenues to the payments of the agreement.
Basically, what this is a tax rebate to ISMA Properties LLC for a big improvement they've done on some properties and built a truck shed for their trucking company. I know they've added some drivers and some trucks. With the addition of this, what this does is gives him a certain percentage of his tax monies back over a 5-year period.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jen. Roll call vote, please.
Feldhacker,
Aye.
Clucky,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Bergsma.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Agenda item 7 is consent agendas, and all the paperwork is in for those, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion for those?
So move.
Moved by Jen, second by
John.
John. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That is the last agenda item for tonight, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Jen, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Rob, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.